Delighted that you folks have chosen to take a few minutes of your afternoon to join us here with the introduction to Diabetes Undone. And just before we begin, before my wife Denise introduces Dr. Guthrie, let's just ask the Lord to bless our time together. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you today for your wonderful love that you shower upon every one of your children. Your word says, I wish above all things that thou mayest prosper and be in health, even as thy soul prospers. Lord, we know that you want us to be healthy, happy, and whole. And Lord, you've given us a beautiful plan in your word in order to make that happen. So Lord, with your blessing, we ask you to guide in the discussion today and give us a good experience learning more about your healing love. We pray in Jesus' name, amen.
Welcome, everyone. I just want to introduce Dr. George Guthrie, our speaker for this afternoon. Dr. Guthrie is the Assistant Director of Florida Hospital Allopathic Family Medicine Residency, and he is the current president of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. Their website says, lifestyle medicine is revolutionizing our healthcare system. Join us in sparking a movement that will result in lower costs, improve outcomes, and enhanced well-being. The American College of Lifestyle Medicine is working to treat the cause of disease. So Dr. Guthrie received his medical degree from Loma Linda University and completed his residency at Hinsdale Hospital near Chicago. He has a certification from the Certification Board of Nutrition Specialists, is a certified diabetes educator, and has a special interest in the lifestyle treatment of type 2 diabetes, hypertension, obesity, and coronary heart disease. He also obtained a Master's of Public Health degree with a focus on nutrition and joined the faculty of the School of Public Health and the School of Medicine at Loma Linda University. Dr. Guthrie joined the faculty of the Florida Hospital Family Medicine Residency Program in 2007, where he continues to focus on community and lifestyle medicine. He's been involved in the development of several lifestyle change programs, including the Complete Health Improvement Project, which is also called CHIP, the Wellspring Diabetes Program, and the Creation Health Program at Florida Hospital. With his expertise in lifestyle medicine, Dr. Guthrie has had various speaking engagements around the world. In 2008, he hosted a television series, Your Life in Health. Recently, he was in the Ukraine working with people involved in lifestyle medicine there, and he actually just very recently came back from Egypt, where he was a speaker, one of the speakers at a conference there on diabetes. So, without further ado, let's welcome Dr. Guthrie.
Wow, it sounds amazing, doesn't it? Well, it's good to have you all here this afternoon to talk a little bit about diabetes. 2 years ago, I was here for a health talk, and I think I talked about diabetes then, too, except that there was not a follow-up program. This time, there's something to do about it. Get connected. You don't have to do it all by yourself. Now, I appreciate Pastor Putt being so supportive of, and I know several have done very well. So, with adopting lifestyle changes and watching things change. So, we're, I guess, kicking off a Diabetes Undone program. I will tell you we are doing the Diabetes Undone program in our office. That would be a long ways for you to drive, right? So we're running that twice a week, and then we're also doing another one called the Full Plate Diet, which is to help people with kind of losing weight, those types of things. It's really exciting to be able to help people reverse their disease. Years ago, and not all that long ago, it was dangerous in the presence of a physician to talk about reversing diabetes. I mean, you could get in big trouble. You know, they pound me on the chest and say, you're giving people false hope. Well, is it really false hope? We got enough evidence now the internists, the endocrinologists are now accepting this phrase, diabetes reversal. First, because the surgeons started using it. You know, those that go in and do the bariatric surgery to help you lose weight, because they put it on the billboard, we'll make your diabetes go away. So once the surgeons started to say it, then the internists are willing to say, oh, okay, well, maybe we should start recognizing that. And certainly now there's enough scientific evidence that it is accepted as true, yet we get the same response that we got in the early 1990s when Dean Ornish demonstrated that you could reverse heart disease. See, what happened then was Dean Ornish proved it. Everybody before that said, it can't be done. I don't think so. You haven't proved it yet. When he proved it, they said, yeah, it can be done, but nobody will do it. So then they wouldn't tell anybody, right? So it took a long time. It took like 15 years before Medicare would begin to pay for Dean Ornish's heart disease reversal. And we're in kind of part of that phase now for diabetes. And what I'm going to do today is kind of give you an introduction, what diabetes is, kind of where it comes from, so you can understand that. And then it should be fairly obvious what you need to do. And then, of course, the Diabetes Undone program gets to follow up on that. Now, I would like to know something about you. We had a very kind introduction of myself. I begin to feel almost sainted. Well done. But I want to know something about you. I mean, who am I talking to? How many of you have diabetes yourself? Okay, so we have a few. Anybody have type 1 diabetes? Okay, so it must be everybody is type 2? Is anybody with type 3 diabetes? That gets exciting. Type 3 diabetes is now a term used for Alzheimer's disease. Isn't that interesting? Diabetes is accelerated aging, and it actually makes our brain get sick too. So, yeah, they are talking about it. There's probably some people here with type 1.5, and you may not know it. Many doctors miss that diagnosis. Let's talk a little bit about type 2 diabetes. And Rob, would you remind me how long I have? Until somebody goes to sleep or snores?
Truly, I mean, it's 2:30, 3:34. I mean, we can take it in 2 sections if you want.
Well, I wanted to leave time for people to ask questions, and because I think there are likely some. And
If we were here till 4:30, I don't think anyone would start.
well, we'll try to be kind to you. If I learned several years ago, I spoke next to a very vibrant speaker, and I ate with him at lunch, and he said, "You can tell when you're losing them. They start coughing." So he says, when they cough, you have to either sit down or tell a story. So I'm watching you, okay? So diabetes undone. Undone is a word that's not reversal, but it is, let's say, it means similar. We're undoing it. So that gives us some encouragement. Okay, so this is a series of slides which I like to show. It's provided to us by the federal government. And you can see we have the states up here, each with a different color. The ones that are white have no data. And then as you see, as the colors change, the percentage of the population that has, and this one is obesity, although there's another set for diabetes as well, that is very similar to this. So watch and see what happens as we move. So there's 86, 87, 88, 89, 90, 91, 92, 93, 94, 95, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003, 2004, 5, 6, We've got to be getting close to the end here. 7, 8, 9. Is there one more? And there's 2010. I think that's the last one. What do you think? Was that change a rapid evolutionary genetic shift? You think that was all genes? Generally, we don't think that evolution works that fast. You're going to make it half and half. Well, you know, you're not wrong, because what we've discovered about genes is they're more than just the genes we are born with. There's something called epigenetics, and it's how your lifestyle changes your genes expression. So the gene expression can change with lifestyle changes. I would suggest to you that what you saw on the screen was actually a lifestyle change, and there's almost certainly some genetic changes with that, but they're the epigenetic genes. They're not the basic ones that don't change so quickly. These are the expression of genes. And that should be good news for you. I mean, we're sorry for the country and all those people who have gained the weight. I can tell you that the slides also available for diabetes are exactly the same map. You see exactly the same thing happen. Weight is going up and diabetes is going up. As a matter of fact, we even coined a new term called diabesity. Okay? So you put the two together. As you get overweight, your body gets insulin resistant, and then you're on the way to diabetes. If your pancreas is really strong, you might not get diabetes right away, but you'll gain a lot of weight. If your pancreas is weak, you'll get the diabetes much sooner. But the process is the same. What do you think in the culture has brought this disease? Fast food. We're able to get a lot of calories in fast, more calories than we need, a lot of fat, a lot of sugar. Sedentary lifestyle. I tell people they can catch diabetes from their computer. Right? I mean, just sitting in front of the computer, we just do it for hours and hours. Many of us now spend most of our time sitting in front of a computer. While before we might reference the computer or go to the computer for information, now it's everything, isn't it? And, well, what's that? Put it on a treadmill. Okay, I like that idea. I just got one of those stand-up desks, and I haven't installed it yet. But there are ways to kind of, keep busy while you do it. So, there you go. Now that's a smart one. I have suggested that for people with their exercise bicycle, right? You can't watch the TV unless it's plugged into the generator to which you are actually running. Yeah, so that would make sense too. So we have a diabesity epidemic, and we don't have the money to take care of it if we're trying to do it with modern kind of technology. Pills. If you've started the diabetes treadmill, if I can call it that, the diabetes journey, the first thing that usually happens with type 2 diabetes is people get metformin, which fortunately for many of us is free at Publix, right? Are you acquainted with this? Right? On Walmart's $4 list, so this is not a problem. And then you might add generally something for blood pressure, because that tends to come along, and that may be free. But once you get past that first level of pills, it gets really expensive, really expensive. And so we're having a lot of trouble with that. And of course, as the disease progresses, we've got the problems that come to us. So the good news is that there is some reversibility. Why do we see people that are slender with diabetes? And I gave you a hint already, okay? I said if your pancreas is weak, you'll get diabetes when you're thinner. If your pancreas is strong, you won't get diabetes until you get thicker. Do you like that word, thick? It's better than the alternative. Okay. So, diabetes epidemic. Now, America is so good at this that we have learned how to export it. And it has made it to Africa. You heard earlier that I was just in Egypt, and I spoke with some of the diabetes experts, the endocrinologists there in northern Africa. And I mean, this is kind of a sad thing. They recognize they didn't used to have diabetes, at least I guess the pharaohs did, the rich people, but the poor folks didn't have it. Now they've got it. And, I apologize for everything the white man has done, right? White flour, white Crisco. It seems like, whenever the white man comes in, it tends to cause trouble. And I think we've been too good at exporting this. Lifestyle diseases are many. Diabetes I consider the flagship because it's kind of where everything is going. If you keep on doing what you're doing, that's kind of the worst end. But all of these things are on the way. And there's the diabetes at top. Obesity, we've already connected that term diabesity. High blood pressure, heart disease, polycystic ovary syndrome, which is a menstrual irregularity that happens in younger women also. Cancers, prostate cancer, for example. It's kind of interesting, the same lifestyle that reverses heart disease and diabetes also has been demonstrated in the scientific literature to reverse prostate cancer, okay? So that's, there are kind of other things connected. It's a one big system and there's a lot of things affected. Okay, in order for you to understand type 2 diabetes, and the others, I guess, we need to understand how it's put together. So what you've got on the screen is my artwork that's explaining what normal is. Do you like my artwork? Like, you don't quit your day job. Okay, I got it. So that's supposed to be a stomach, that's supposed to be a pancreas, and that's a blood vessel. Over here on the side is a cell, a generic cell, and it should say busy cell, but look, this is one of those things the computers do when we switch them. So yeah, that's a busy cell, and you can see there's energy coming down into the stomach through the esophagus, from the mouth. It's mixed up in the stomach with the enzymes. It moves into the small intestine. It's absorbed into the blood vessels, and from the blood vessels, some of the blood vessels go by the pancreas, and the pancreas makes a hormone that we call insulin. Have you heard of it? Insulin is not doing any work, it's a messenger. I like to call it the Paul Revere hormone. Paul Revere wasn't fighting the British, right? He was taking the message that the British were coming. And so insulin is taking the message that the energy is coming. That energy is going to a busy cell. Let's say that's my thigh muscle. My thigh muscles, when I'm running a race, I'm using those a lot, right? So each step I use that muscle. That muscle is busy and active and it needs energy. If I'm running a marathon, you can imagine me grabbing a bottle of Gatorade and swallowing that Gatorade. That Gatorade has energy in it, sugar. It has water for my hydration. And number 3, it's got electrolytes for the stuff I'm sweating out. So it goes into my stomach. It's absorbed. I know that's a cold. You're not bored yet. I figured it out. So the energy goes in, it goes to the pancreas releases the insulin, and when it gets to my thigh muscle is very insulin sensitive. It says, give it to me. Same race, same Gatorade, same insulin, and my eye blinker says, hey, I'm just cleaning the windshield. I don't really need all that much. Each cell decides how much energy it needs and adjusts a relative insulin sensitivity or resistance for the energy that's coming in. God designed it this way, and it's excellent. If there's a lot of energy, it's distributed according to need. If there's a little, it's distributed according to need. So that's normal. What's abnormal? Let's see if I've got anything else. Oh, this slide is a great one. This is from a scientific article explaining how insulin works in the cell. You've probably heard it. It's a key, right, that opens up the lock. Well, it's a little more complex than that. You see you've got glucose coming, and first, insulin attaches here to this receptor, makes changes inside the cell, comes over here, moves these GLUT4 transporters over to the wall, and then the glucose comes in. So there's a bunch of that stuff that happens. And I always like to point this out because some of you may worry about this. Tax day just came, right? IRS has nothing to do with the government. This is like insulin resistance system or something, right? So hopefully you're encouraged and not paranoid because of that. So it's amazing what we've learned about how it works. You start to get insulin resistance, and it can happen here, where the receptor has not been reactivated. Once it's activated, it's not reactivated. It's got to be taken inside, reactivated, and put back. That slows down. These GLUT transporters are brought back in and reactivated and put out. And if they don't, if they're not reactivated, or if they're not activated once they're created, there's a lot of ways that you can get an insulin resistance. Things just don't work. So that's normal, and I think we've got the insulin going all the way over. And let's see, I have the insulin coming. I have the doors opening to let the glucose into the cells. And I think, did I get them all? Let's see what happens. There it is. Okay, now here's type 2 diabetes. Choice has gone wrong. And my favorite word picture for this is a couch potato. Have you all heard of a couch potato? Recliner, large screen TV, 2 remotes, table, lamp. Bowl of ice cream, finished. Box of Oreos, 1.5 rows, gone. 2 6-packs of something. And if I know the couch potato, they didn't get the second one. Somebody else brought it to them. And I hear crinkly bags. Is that Cheetos or is that potato chips? It's a lot of calories, and all those calories come in, and I think we can watch them here. We've got a lazy cell. Now this is a thigh muscle cell, and it's sitting in a recliner, and here comes the energy. Notice the arrows are bigger? I took artistic license here. Okay? Into the blood vessels, and this is a lot of energy, and it comes to the pancreas. The pancreas makes the hormone that we call insulin, and what do you think the thigh muscle says with all this? No, I don't need it. I mean, it might be so polite as to say, no thank you, right? The no thank you might even get larger, and finally it reaches the point where it's no, I don't want it. And when the whole body, or almost all the cells in the body are saying no, we say that the whole body has insulin resistance. Does that make sense to you? Now, where did that insulin resistance come from? Was that a genetic problem? Well, it's too many calories in and not enough calories out. It could be a decrease in exercise, because if I'd been out exercising, my thigh muscles would have liked that stuff. But it could also be I've got too many calories coming in, right? So it's that balance of calories. Calories in, calories out. And when that imbalance leaves too many calories in, then our body responds. And this is the natural response. Diabetes is not something you catch. Diabetes is something you earn. Too many calories in, not enough calories out. Is that fair enough? I'm talking about type 2 diabetes. Now, if you recognize that basic physiology, you already know the basics of how to reverse it, don't you? Because you're going to have to decrease the calories in, and you're going to have to increase the calories out. Pretty basic. I mean, I've asked 5th graders. I've given this lecture to 5th graders. I say, okay, you're the doctor, I'm the patient. What do I do? And they can tell me. It's really pretty basic once you understand the basic physiology. What many doctors fail to recognize in this whole picture is that energy management is at the cell level. It's not at the mouth, it's not at the stomach, it's not at the pancreas. Each cell decides for itself how much energy it needs and adjusts a relative insulin sensitivity and resistance. Okay? Basic concept, when missed, kind of throws everything off. Okay, so how does the body respond to this dilemma? Too many calories in, not enough calories out. Well, the first thing it does is that it makes more insulin. You saw how big the arrow for insulin got, right? So it makes more insulin, and it can make more insulin for a while. You can see that insulin level going up and up and up and up, but finally it comes to a point where the body can't make any more insulin. If your pancreas is weak, it might be lower. If your pancreas is higher, stronger, it might be more insulin. So when it gets to that spot where it can't make any more, then we start to see the blood sugars going up. And they slowly kind of sneak up. We see that fasting blood sugar sneaking up until it finally reaches the magic level of 125 milligrams per deciliter. And at that point, the doctor says, you have diabetes. Now, this whole process probably started 10 to 15 years beforehand. And it just finally got to this point. It's kind of an arbitrary line, this 125. When I was in medical school 35 years ago, they told me it's 145. And they lowered it to 125. Why did they do that? It seems cheating to me. It's not fair, right? Well, I think what they're recognizing is this is a process, and we need to start doing something about it earlier. I would argue 125 is too long to wait. It would be better to start that intervention earlier, to be able to recognize it when it's starting and then stop it. Because the earlier you try to reverse it, the easier it is to reverse, right? I don't want to... If you've had an amputation from diabetes, I'm not going to be able to help you grow it back. I mean, there are some things that are not reversible, right? If you've gone blind, I don't know that you can get your vision back. That's probably irreversible. But certainly early, the earlier we do it, the earlier it is to turn it around. So we'd like to start earlier. So our body knows that too much sugar in the blood is not good. Too much sugar in the blood tends to make the blood vessels a little bit smaller, and there's less blood flow, there's a little more inflammation, and we start to have problems with small blood vessels in the eyes. Those small blood vessels not giving enough oxygen to the retina starts to send out messages, we need more oxygen, and the body begins to make new blood vessels. Now you might think that's good, but new blood vessels are more likely to break. And if they break, that leads to blindness. So that's why people with diabetes are supposed to see their eye doctor once a year to have their retina looked at. If there's any new blood vessels, they'll laser them because they don't want them to bleed and lead to blindness. Make sense? In the kidneys, we have the same problem. Over time, it begins to add up. And for people with diabetes, we like to check the protein in their urine because that's an early indicator, the microalbumin we call it, that the kidneys are under stress and having a hard time really cleaning things as they should. The small blood vessels are inflamed. And let's see, I think I have small blood vessel disease. There's eyes leading to blindness, kidney leading to kidney failure, and if nerves are bothered, it leads to neuropathy. Have you heard of neuropathy before? Neuro means nerve, pathy means it's sick. And a sick nerve can feel in many different ways. Some people feel it as a pain. Some people feel it as a numbness. Some people feel it like it feels like I'm walking on pebbles, or it feels like I have cotton between my toes. It doesn't have to be something that's painful. It is a nerve that's complaining. And when that nerve is complaining, you have these kind of sensations. That it is a signal that there's a problem. Those that have pain, of course, is the ones that it's hardest for. And then, if the blood vessels are narrow to the feet, and since it's a long ways away, there's a little bit of a break in the skin, a puncture, or maybe an ulcer, because someone can't feel because they've got the neuropathy and it's numb. An infection will get started and there's not enough blood flow to fight the infection. The infection starts to win and gangrene sets in, and the only thing to do is to cut it off. And there's amputations. Diabetes in this country is the most common cause of blindness, kidney failure, neuropathy, and amputations. It's a bad disease. The body, seeming to understand that, tries to keep that blood sugar down as far as it can. And it does that by secreting extra insulin to try to tell the cells to take what they're refusing. The cells have insulin resistance, and the body knows that that sugar needs to be put away. And so we have another set of problems that come from high insulin. Insulin, you think, is a good thing. It's a messenger. But too much of a good thing is a bad thing. Yes, ma'am? I do not understand how chelation would help the underlying problem. I have also seen that, quotes, the gangrene improve, the poor circulation improve. Once the gangrene sets in, it's kind of too late. I'm assuming you're meaning somebody that has like a diabetic ulcer, because yeah, we've had those, but that's a poor circulation. Gangrene you can't stop. Once it's done, it's off. But if you have an ulcer, by exercising that and fixing things, yes, I've seen people keep their legs. We've had even people come. When I worked this morning, I mentioned working at the Lifestyle Center of America. We had people who were told, you need an amputation. They said, I'm coming. And by the time they were done with their 2 weeks, they didn't need an amputation. It was better. Okay. Yeah, lifestyle can make a huge difference. And we're thankful for that. That's an interesting challenge if they don't want you to walk, or if you don't want to walk. Exercise is definitely an important part of that. So here's what high insulin levels do. And pay attention to this, because this is how we diagnose prediabetes. We do that by looking at insulin effects. So we call these large blood vessel diseases, although that's kind of a category that doesn't fit, but the science uses this to talk about it. Insulin is a growth hormone. Insulin tends to make you gain weight. The stronger your pancreas is, the more insulin you make, the more weight you're going to gain, because insulin puts energy, puts muscle, puts fat into storage. So it helps us grow. There's a strong association of high insulin with high blood pressure. Exactly causative may or may not be. It does make us hang on to more sodium. More sodium tends to mean more water in the pipes. If there's more water in the pipes, you expect the pressure to go up. But the insulin resistance itself keeps the blood vessels from dilating, so it makes them a little tighter. So now you've got smaller pipes and more water, and the blood pressure goes up. Blood pressure is not a disease. Blood pressure is a symptom of something that's going on inside. Insulin also tends to increase the cholesterol and the bad cholesterol, the LDL cholesterol, and it decreases the good cholesterol, the HDL. And because of all of these things, we're increasing our risk of heart attack. So I mentioned earlier this irregular menstruation that happens to younger women, PCOS, that is also present, and I've mentioned prostate cancer already. So high insulin levels will tend to drive. Remember, insulin makes things grow, and a cancer is cells that are growing out of control. Does that make sense? So insulin tends to increase risks, or be associated with increased risk of multiple cancers. So what we recognize this is prediabetes, and we have these things that we use to talk about. Maybe I told you this story before. I think it was 1997. I was in Los Angeles for the American Diabetes Association consensus panel on kind of metabolic syndrome, this whole business here. So that was kind of interesting to me. And I heard them arguing about it. They said, we should be able to measure insulin levels and say, aha, insulin level is high, you got a problem. But we can't do that, because if the insulin level is normal, we can't say you don't have a problem. So they said we can't do that. What we have to do is to look at the clinical picture. We look for evidence of high insulin levels. And those levels of high insulin are kind of together what we say is how we make the diagnosis of prediabetes. You may recognize it in yourself. So the first guy that described this was Gerald Reaven in around 1987, and he called it Syndrome X. The cardiologist said, you can't have that name because they already had it for some rare syndrome. So now we've got metabolic syndrome and insulin resistance syndrome, both of which are used. I like the insulin resistance syndrome a little better. Now in this country, about 33% of adults have metabolic syndrome. That's pretty impressive, isn't it? Yeah. So 1 out of 3 over age, I think it was age 20. Those two pictures are to remind you that you can earn diabetes by sitting on your duff and by eating too many calories, right? It's pretty straightforward. Now I'm going to go in a little bit deeper. Does anybody have any questions? So people are afraid older folks are going to fall, so they tell them to sit still, and sitting still will actually hasten your death. So it's a little bit of a challenge. Of course, breaking your hip can too, so there's a balance. I heard another voice back here. Who started to speak? Use the microphone. Okay. Yes, ma'am. I will try to repeat. Okay, she's asking about what happens when the blood sugar drops too low, too fast. It ends up that low blood sugar is considered to be a prediabetes state. And this is the way we think of it. The insulin is putting out, your body's putting out a lot of insulin to try to get the energy put away. And it's so used to doing that, that if there's no food there, sometimes it'll overshoot because it's so used to putting out too much, and it will forget to stop, and it'll drive it too low. So it's on the way to diabetes, and interestingly, the way to manage that is to eat fewer meals that are high in fiber. So the sugar doesn't go up high, it goes up low and stays up. And then you won't have that dropping problem. It's generally a response from getting too much sugar in and dropping it off. A lot of people don't know, for example, that white flour hits the body very similarly to sugar. So, a lot of white flour in a meal, potatoes to a lesser degree, but there are things that can make that sugar go up high. So that's a good point, a good question. Okay, let's talk about the process on the way to diabetes and see if you can learn something. Maybe this will be boring, maybe it won't. So there you got the energy coming in, it's going to the muscles, and some of it is going to go to the pancreas, which will release the insulin. You've seen this before. And there's the muscle, which is going to now, let's see if I can get it. Okay. That's supposed to be insulin resistance, right? So if the muscle is not exercising, it'll make this insulin resistance. The body's response to that is for insulin to go up, and we start to see the weight going up, we start to see the blood pressure going up, we start to see the lipids going up. When you see those things happening, you're looking at prediabetes, okay? It's on its way. Your weight started up, your blood pressure started up, or your cholesterol is going up. These are kind of connected. So there's no diabetes at this point. It's prediabetes. You see, that's the number one. Number two has to do with the liver. Now, one of the liver's jobs is to make sugar. When you don't have anything to eat, you skip a meal, under normal circumstances, your brain still needs sugar, right? And the liver's job is to take the fat and the protein and other things and release it into the bloodstream so your brain has the glucose it needs to work with. So you're fasting when your body has run out of food and the liver is making glucose. So when you have your break fast, breakfast, right? You take that food goes in, it talks to the pancreas makes the insulin, and the insulin should go to the liver and say, there's energy here, stop making glucose. And it works fine until the liver gets insulin resistant. Now, you can't take your liver out and make it do push-ups, right? That's not possible. It's a very active organ, but too much energy in and not enough energy out will lead to the point where your liver develops insulin resistance. And then we start to see the fasting blood sugar go up. And it's at this point that we make the diagnosis of diabetes, when the liver is making too much glucose. Look, there's the glucose that's supposed to be there, and there's the insulin resistance, and now there's extra glucose coming out. You see how switching programs got rid of my arrows? Those are supposed to be arrows. So, pointing up. So the step 3 in this whole diabetes business has to do with the pancreas, because with time, the pancreas gets weaker and weaker and weaker. So it's that balance between pancreas strength and insulin resistance that's making it happen. Does that make sense to you? Pretty straightforward. Diabetes is not something you catch. Diabetes is something you earn. Yes?
How
How do calories become fat? Our body prefers to burn carbohydrates. So when we eat a mixed meal that has carbohydrates and fat in it, the fat is put into storage preferentially, and the carbohydrates are burned. So if you don't use up all the calories and you have extra calories, you tend to put on weight. Did anybody notice that the weight goes on easier than it comes off? Yeah. Yeah, it's very much that way. It's a real challenge to try to keep it. Once it gets on, your body, for some reason, likes to keep it. And that's why it comes on a little bit easier, because that fat goes into storage. It's not the primary source of energy. Now, if you're exercising, your muscle will burn fat and likes that. So that should be some benefit. If you're exercising, that helps that. But it will prefer the glucose over the fat. But it doesn't mind burning fat like some other tissue does. Yes?
I hear always that carbohydrates are turned into fat.
Very good question. She says she heard that carbohydrates are turned into fat. Now, you heard that I did a master's degree in nutrition, and as part of my classes on carbohydrates, they told me that if you use glucose, just the plain glucose, it's not all that sweet. It's not table sugar. Glucose is the stuff in our blood. If you were to put an IV in and run in that glucose, you'd have to give about 5,000 calories a day before the body would turn that glucose into fat. It doesn't like to do that. But there's another sugar that's very common in our environment that is much easier to turn into fat. As a matter of fact, our bodies like to do it rather quickly, and that's called fructose. Have you heard of that? Table sugar is made up of 1 glucose and 1 fructose. So you're getting 50% fructose when you use table sugar. Now, interestingly, potatoes are made up of glucose strings. We call them starches, right? So starches is all glucose, so you don't get the fructose with that. So it ends up that the whole potato, while it may have the same number of calories as your sugar, is actually better for you because it doesn't have the fructose, which is more easily turned into fat. We recognize there's a correlation here, especially with the liver, because fructose will be turned into fat in the liver, a majority of it, and that will lead to a fatty liver. Okay? Same problem with alcohol, by the way. Alcohol, our body sees as ethanol, the stuff you drink, whether you're taking beer or wine, is a couple of carbons together with a little alcohol group. The body says toxic, takes the alcohol group off because it doesn't belong, and it says, now what do I do with these 2 carbons? And it says, oh, I remember, and it starts sticking them together, and that's what a fat is these little 2 carbon chains that are put together. So the American Diabetes Association says, oh yeah, you can have alcohol, but you consider it a fat, because that's what it happens in the liver. So you get a fatty liver from alcohol, you get a fatty liver from too much sugar, especially the fructose kind. She says, does that mean fruit has more fructose? We discovered fructose in fruit. And interestingly enough, the science is telling us that a little bit of fructose in the meal is beneficial to the physiology. It's when there's lots of it that it's a problem. Okay? So so the little bit in fruit is not an issue. Fructose is about 1.5 times as sweet as table sugar. So the industry likes to use it because they need less of it to get the same level of sweetness. What are the other sources of fructose? Well, high fructose corn syrup. I mean, that's not hard to figure out. That has about the same percentage, about 50-50 of glucose and fructose. Did you have one in mind that you're interested in?
No, not really. So the fructose is not just, it's not from fruit necessarily.
No, it's from all kinds of things. Well, I've already told you table sugar, which often comes from beets or sugar cane, right, has sucrose in it, which is a fructose and a glucose, right? We don't get as much free fructose, although when we take in the table sugar, it quickly separates and becomes the 2 different sugars in our body. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
How does it go together? What is better, if I drink my lemon alone and later on my orange, or if
She wants to know if she can take her lemon and her orange together or take them separately. I can't imagine how it would make any difference. So, no, no, that's kind of a different issue. The organic acids, I don't think it matters. Yes, ma'am.
I was wondering, even though fructose may come from fruit as a source, it also, if you eat a fruit, you don't have the fiber.
That's right. Exactly. So you're not eating, when you take the fruit, you're not getting a bunch of sugar. You're getting a little bit of fructose mixed with a whole package. I ate the first peach off my peach tree yesterday. Man, it was good. Sweet and delicious. It's the way God put it together, right? It's got a lot of water in it. It's got a lot of fiber in it. And it's got a little fructose, but it tastes sweet. Which is interesting. Just because it's sweet doesn't mean it's bad. It's really better to take it as close as you can to the way God made it. So, yes, ma'am.
I'm a little stubborn, so I don't quite understand when you just said before the orange has more sweet than has more sugar. So how then is there not a difference of the lemon? Doesn't the lemon has a more alkaline kind of?
But lemon still has as far as I know, it's about the same amount of sugar.
Lemon and orange, the same amount sugar.
Yeah,
okay, that answers my question now.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's just that the lemon has more of the acids that make it feel sour to us. It still has the same sugars. Has anybody ever met miracle fruit? Anybody? I have a friend who introduced me to miracle fruit. Miracle fruit, little red berry. And he said, eat this. So I ate it and chewed it and swallowed it. He says, now take the lemon. Because what it did was completely removed the sour. And all I tasted was incredible sweet. It was like the very best lemonade I had ever had. Yeah. So, I mean, it's a unique sort of a thing. But there's sugar there. God made it that way. Good. Okay, these are some very interesting questions. I hope that's been of some help. Do you understand now where diabetes type 2 comes from? I would like to say a little bit about type 1 and type 1.5, because I think there's some people here that may have one of the others and they've been told they have type 2. So type 1 diabetes is different. Type 1 diabetes is when the pancreas is attacked. Usually we think by a virus. There are some people that have a genetic bent that make this more likely to happen. The virus makes the pancreas sick. The immune system gets confused. It thought it was fighting the virus, and it ends up fighting the pancreas. So the pancreas is knocked out by the body's own immune system, which means now there's no insulin. And people with type 1 diabetes tend to be thin, and they're very insulin sensitive. People with type 2 diabetes will have sometimes maybe 160, 200, 250, 300 units of insulin a day to control their diabetes. People with type 1 need 7, 12, 15, something very, very low. And they tend to be quite thin. So generally, we've called this in the past juvenile diabetes because it usually happens to children. The younger they are, the faster it happens. So it will rapidly hit within 6 days or 6 weeks. There's another one that we sometimes call 1.5, or latent autoimmune diabetes of adulthood, that happens to grown-ups. I mean, people in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. And what happens is, and this is probably not a virus sort of a thing, but something is knocking out the pancreas, and it's usually an autoimmune thing. You've heard of autoimmune like lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, thyroiditis, Hashimoto's thyroiditis. I mean, there's a bunch of different kind of autoimmune diseases. Well, if the immune system decides for a similar reason to attack the pancreas, that pancreas is going to get weaker and weaker and weaker. And as it gets weaker, generally the diabetes occurs when someone is still a bit thinner, although that's not always the case. Let me tell you an interesting story. About 10 years ago, I had a gentleman come to my office who was very heavy, and he had diabetes. So we said, you need to lose the weight. And he was exercising. By the time he'd see me, he'd already lost like 20 or 30 pounds. So he was improving and getting better. His wife said, we're going to help you, and she paid for him to go on a Forks Over Knives cruise. Have you heard of Forks Over Knives? You may have seen the video, encourage people to eat a plant-based diet, and they organized a cruise. And so his wife, nurse at the hospital, said, I'm going to pay for you to go, and I guess the two of them went together. And he said, I'm sticking with it. I didn't see him for 3 years. When he came back, he had lost 90 pounds. He was thin and he was fit. He was running every day. He said, Doc, I feel great. I feel healthy. It is not a problem. And I said, good for you. Your diabetes is gone. Let's prove it. Let's get your A1C. His last A1C was like 13.5, so it was really high. His blood sugars had been terrible, right? I said, let's prove that your diabetes is gone. And I got the A1C back, and it was like 13.5. And it's supposed to be less than 7. For those of us who don't have diabetes, it should be less than 5.7, right? And here it was really high, and he said, Doc, I feel good. What's going on? So I said, I guess we should have checked your pancreatic function. So we checked his pancreatic function, and his pancreatic function was pretty much gone. So he had metabolic syndrome with all the obesity, but underneath he also had the type 1 diabetes. So I put him on insulin, the long-acting, about 7. I started at 11, but we dropped him to 7 units a day. And his fasting blood sugars came down to normal. And then his A1C was still up a little bit, and I put him on inhaled insulin. Have you all heard of the inhaled insulin? You can actually get it where you breathe it rather than shoot it. You can use for short-acting, not long-acting. So he uses that 3 times a day. His A1C is under 6. He has no low blood sugars at all. We identified both his problems. See, he reversed his type 2 diabetes, the metabolic syndrome piece, and then I was able to identify the autoimmune part. So he actually had 2 kinds of diabetes at the same time. Interesting, huh? I know, it knocks you off your rocker. Any questions on that? Does it make sense? It's weird, you never thought it was possible, huh? Can you come off of insulin is the question, right? So if you have type 1 and maybe type 1.5, that's something we're not sure about yet. You probably can't, certainly not for type 1. But for type 2, as long as there's some pancreatic function left, there is some possibility that you can come off insulin. And I've helped numerous people come off insulin. The first thing I do is to measure their pancreas to see if they're making enough insulin to be able to do that.
So if you use a booster and you're type 2 and your doctors weighed the idea of putting you on insulin or not, how does a booster affect the chemistry of all the different things?
By booster, you're talking about one of the other medications.
Yeah,
then.
like Trulicity or Byetta. You know.
Yeah, well, the medications, both the medications you have mentioned tend to strengthen the pancreas. So that sounds like something that might be beneficial, but it's not dealing with the underlying problem, which is insulin resistance, too many calories in, not enough calories out. I consider medications a tool, right? If we can put it, since we're in a church, in biblical terms, it's grace, right? Diabetes would kill you sooner. We got medications that can kind of help prolong that, help you live longer. It would be better if you changed your lifestyle. I think we call that obedience, don't we? Okay. So when you change your lifestyle, then you can make a lot of it go away. We still need, medications can be helpful. And there's a little bit of a talent to helping people come off medications. A lot of doctors don't know how to do that. They know how to add them rather than take them away. Okay. Well, let's see what else we can learn. Let's see. Some of this next here, I can tell you the fat cells get involved with it. What I have at the bottom are some things that I use to measure the pancreas. I stole this slide from a deck that I use to talk to my doctor friends, my residents, the ones that I'm teaching. So we make the diagnosis of prediabetes with 3 out of 5. Blood pressure, 130 over 85, or on blood pressure medicine. Number 2, a fasting blood sugar over 100. Number 3, triglycerides over 150. Number 4, an HDL in men less than 40, in women less than 50. And waist circumference greater than 40 inches in men, greater than 35 inches in women. So this is what we use in this country. Other nations use different numbers. People from Asia, for example, tend to have, it's a lot earlier. They use, in Japan, for example, they use the waist circumference only. And instead of being 40, it's like, I think it's 38 or 36, something like that. And then if they see that, then they start looking for the others. So each country does a little different, but that's the way we do it. This is the point where those of you who said, I don't have diabetes, may discover that you have prediabetes. And remember, prediabetes is simply part of a continuum. If you keep doing what you're doing, you'll keep getting what you got, right? Now is a good time to kind of change. Any questions about this prediabetes picture before I move on? Is it reversible? Well, we've been talking about this, and I started out by telling you it was. But let's think about this, right? Is obesity reversible? Yes. Okay, we can lose weight. We know people that have lost weight and kept it off. Is hypertension reversible? Yes. Now, some of you may have experience with this, some not. Generally, I know in my training, we've told patients that if they start on a high blood pressure medicine, they were going to have to be on it for the rest of their life. But we know that losing weight will drop that blood pressure. Exercise will drop that blood pressure. And as I pointed out to you earlier, blood pressure, elevated blood pressure, is usually a symptom, not a specific kind of disease process. So you need to find out what's causing it and then turn that around. So yes, that's reversible. What about heart disease? Is that reversible? Yeah, Dean Ornish demonstrated that to us. While nobody will do it, there are still people who are doing it. And if you're willing to jump through the hoops, you can make your heart disease go away. That's good news. Now, is diabetes reversible? And I think the whole emphasis here is yes, diabetes is reversible. So that should be good news for you. Now, do I tell you the story of my first one? Okay. I was, yes, ma'am. She says if an ejection fraction, EF, she must be a nurse, I'm guessing, or a physician, right? Yeah. Okay. So she says ejection fraction of about 5 to 10%. Can they really get better? So ejection fraction is what percent of when the heart contracts, what percent of the blood is actually pumped out of the heart? And you're talking about 5 to 10%. It should be over 35%. It'd be better if it was 50 or 60%, wouldn't it? We'd like the heart to be able to pump efficiently instead of just doing a little bit. The good news is that it's the atherosclerosis that's reversible, and with time we see the ejection fraction improving as well. Once the blood supply improves, there's some very interesting studies where they have done heart transplants, and you know, if I as a man have a heart transplant and it comes from a woman, that heart should have no Y chromosomes in it. When I die, they take me to autopsy and look at my heart. They discover there's Y chromosomes in there. Why? Because my body is restructuring and rebuilding. The body is pretty dynamic. You may have heard about these cells. We call them pluripotential or stem cells, right? So they're always active in our body. And interestingly, when we have a healthy lifestyle, our body makes more of these stem cells. So that's good news too, isn't it? Good. So as an example, to help you on your journey towards lifestyle change, let me tell you the story of the first patient I had that actually reversed his diabetes. Okay? I may have told this story last time, so for those of you who heard it before, it'll be a reminder. How's that? Okay? So his name was Ralph. I had never met him before. He came into the office with a concern. He had a spot on his skin, actually 3 of them, and he said, I don't know what these are. And they were kind of weird, and it took me 15 or 20 seconds to recognize them. But scratching the back of my head inside, I said, I think those are cholesterol deposits in your skin. You know, it wasn't red, it wasn't itchy, it just was this raised yellow thing. And it was flat. I said, I think that's a cholesterol deposit. I'll tell you what. let's check your blood. If your cholesterol is high, I'll know that's what it is. If it's low, then I probably better do a biopsy because my diagnosis is wrong. So I got the lab slip and I ordered up the cholesterol and, of course, the LDL and the HDL. And then I remembered back to medical school. Now, this was before Gerald Reaven had given his talk, so this was like the mid to early 1980s. And I had learned in medical school that people with high cholesterol were more likely to have high blood pressure. He had high blood pressure, it was on his chart. People with high cholesterol were more likely to be overweight. He was overweight. My eyes could tell me that I didn't have to look at the chart. People who have high cholesterol are also more likely to have diabetes. And I said, okay, I'm going to ask for a blood sugar too. So I checked that little box on the lab, and I sent him out to get an appointment and come back after the lab test was done. And sure enough, this was late in the week. He came back early the next week, and I looked at his labs, and his cholesterol was over 300. It was really high. And I said, yeah, you got high cholesterol. This is a problem. We're going to have to change your diet in order to bring that down. See, at that time, Dean Ornish still hadn't published his work about reversal, but I knew that lifestyle was the best thing to do, so I was going to point him in that direction. And then my eye fell down to the blood sugar. His blood sugar was over 200. And this was fasting. In those days, I told you, we made the diagnosis of a fasting blood sugar over 145 or a random blood sugar over 200, and we had to have two of them, okay? So there it was. I had a fasting blood sugar over 200. And I said to him, sir, has anybody ever told you you have diabetes? He said, no. And I said, well, you know, I'm supposed to have a second one to say for sure, but with a fasting blood sugar over 200, I'm pretty sure you got it. And I said, now, the first thing we need to do is some lifestyle changes, like we talked about for your heart disease, and I'll explain that in a little bit. I said, in my experience, people with blood sugars as high as yours, the exercise and the diet are not enough. And often we have to start pills. And he nodded, and I explained. In those days, we had many fewer pills, and they were cheaper. And then I said, because he seemed to understand, I said, now, in my experience, people with blood sugars as high as yours, sometimes the pills don't do it, and they need to take insulin. Now, when I said insulin, this quiet Italian businessman erupted in a veritable Vesuvius. He said, Doc, I don't care what happens, I would die, I'll never take insulin. I mean, this was an emotional response. And even as a young doctor, I recognized that it was best for me not to, butt heads with him. So I quietly waited for the volcano to come down, figuring it wouldn't do me any good to be angry. And as it was kind of winding down, I was putting some things in my brain. You see, I'd been reading some literature about insulin resistance in the muscles. Remember that picture I showed you with the IRS and all that stuff in there? That information was coming out about that time, and I had read that article. And I said, well, if insulin resistance comes from calories, and then I said, well, then the best way to manage that would be to have fewer calories coming in and get people to exercise when there's no energy, right? So exercising in the fasting state made sense to me. So as the volcano quieted down, I said, okay, I'll make you a deal. If you'll do what I tell you to do, as long as your blood sugar's coming down, I won't say anything about pills, I won't say anything about insulin. And I still remember Ralph's response. Doc, I'll do it. So he hit the air with his fist, right? I love stubbornness. Right? Stubbornness is a prerequisite for longevity, and if you've got diabetes and you want to get over it, I sure hope you've got some stubbornness, because if you don't, this is going to be really hard, okay? So I explained to Ralph what to do. I said, Ralph, do you like apples? I like apples. I can eat 2, maybe 3 apples, and I'm full. We smash up our apples, we take the fiber out, we put 7 to 8 apples worth of sugar, calories, right up there at the head of our knife. We take it with the meal, and we say, oh, that was just part of the meal. That was nice. Now, is apple juice bad? Well, no, but apples are better. So better choose apple than apple juice. Corn, do you like corn? I like corn. I think a corn roast, my record was 12 years of corn. right? At the beach with the sand and everything, right? So, that corn is sold to the manufacturer and smashed, corn oil put in a bottle. I buy it off the grocery store. It says no cholesterol. I take it home. I make a salad dressing out of it. I put it on my salad. I'm getting 16 to 18 ears worth of corn oil. Now, is corn oil bad? No, it's probably a good oil, but the corn is better. Do you see what's happening? Better to have it as close as you can to the way God made it. Now, Ralph seemed to be catching on, so I tried one more. I said, "Sir, do you eat grass?" That's exactly what he said. He said, "No, Doc." I said, "Are you sure?" The cow eats grass and drops all the fiber out the back and concentrates, excuse the pun, the calories. So when you eat the animal, you're really got concentrated calories. We got to decrease the calories in. So I told him, use your animal products as condiments, just for flavoring. Better to have a little ground beef in the beans than to have the steak. That would be a mistake. Okay? Better to have a little fish in the soup or a little chicken rather than to have the whole drumstick or the fillet. Use the animal products as condiments, as flavoring. You need a lot more plants because you need decrease kind of concentration of calories. So, and then I was thinking about this kind of exercising while things are empty. And so the last thing I told Ralph was, I want you to eliminate the evening meal. Have breakfast and lunch, but no meal at night. Because in the morning, before you eat breakfast, when your body is run out of energy, I want you to take those muscles out and exercise them. I'm not going to tell you how far to go. I'm not going to tell you how long to go. Just do something in the morning. I didn't know what to tell him. Ralph, again, as he left, he used his fist again and said, "Doc, I'll do it." And I saw him back 2 weeks later. He had gotten his glucometer. He was checking his blood sugars. His blood sugars were better, but they were still very much diabetes and terrible. He told me that first morning when he went out, and these were his words, "I waddled from the front door." Okay? He said he waddled 50 feet and came back. By the time he came in at 10 days, 14 days, something like that, he was already walking a quarter mile in the morning. And I watched him through the year. I had him come back regularly. Each time things were better. I didn't say anything about pills. I didn't say anything about insulin. I still remember the last visit. It's clear in my mind it was a powerful emotional impact. It had been almost a year to the day since Ralph had come in the first time and we had made that diagnosis. Ralph came in with his blood sugars and his log said they were normal. He said, "Doc, I wanted to see what would happen. Last week I had some ice cream and my blood sugar didn't go up." I looked at his report. He had lost 60 pounds. His blood pressure was perfectly normal, no pills, and we had checked his cholesterol, and it was normal. Now, to be truthful, it was normal by the normals in that day, not today, right? So we've kind of ratcheted several of these things down. Ralph still had a little way to go. I had never seen this before. Ralph had completely reversed diabetes, hypertension, and brought his cholesterol down. That completely changed my life, my focus of my career, right? I began to say, we can reverse this. Just giving pills is not enough. We need to address the lifestyle. And so the journey started, and since then, I've seen many, many people make this disease go away. Yes, sir?
Can you go into more, you talk a lot about lifestyle, but what exactly is a whole food plant-based diet look like?
What exactly is a whole food plant-based diet? I'm going to introduce you to this guy to try to answer that question, okay? Because I think it's a good place to start. There's his kind of picture up there, Roy Taylor. He looks like a nice fella, doesn't he? He happens to work at the University of Newcastle in the United Kingdom. That's kind of up on the, I guess they would call it the east coast of England. And he, a diabetes type of researcher, he saw that the people who were doing obesity treatment, the bariatric surgeons, and claiming that diabetes went away, they thought it was because of their surgery. And he said, I don't think it's because of the surgery. I think it's because of the fewer calories. And I want to prove that. So he got a group of people, and he did some very interesting study on them. It's called the Counterpoint Study. It's in the literature. He got the Banting Award lecture from the American Diabetes Association in 2012. So this is not brand new research. We've actually known this for some time. So as he explained it to us, excess calories leads to fat accumulation in the liver, an increase in this liver enzyme ALT. We see VLDL go up, and the VLDL takes the fat and puts it into the pancreas, and the pancreas, fat in the pancreas tends to slow things down. That's what he was demonstrating. So he found a way of measuring that. And he used an MRI test to measure the fat in the organs. It ends up that the hydrogen attached to water and to fat act a little differently, so he was actually able to measure that, the fat in the organs. He put people on 600 calories a day with non-starchy vegetables. Now, they had this little OptiFast packet. I'm sure his institutional review board wouldn't let him do the study unless he made sure they weren't going to be deficient in something. So they gave him this little supplement. Maybe some of you have heard of OptiFast. So that was the packet that they put along. But it was 600 calories a day. That is 25% of the usual calories for the individual. And followed them for 8 weeks, and then followed to see what would happen. And indeed, what he found was that the fat was leaving the pancreas, and that the pancreatic function was improving, and the liver insulin resistance was going down. And he measured those using a variety of high-tech stuff. And these are slides that demonstrate here, this is the fasting glucose. It came down quickly. We see this happen in people who make aggressive lifestyle changes. This is the hepatic glucose production. So this is how much sugar the liver is making. You see how it drops. And this is, let's see, the liver triglycerides. So this is the fat in the liver. You see how it's dropped? In 8 weeks, he's able to make this diabetes, in essence, go away. And that's pretty dramatic. If you look at, 600 calories a day, that's not a lot. That's not the way you're going to live the rest of your life, right? If you'd like it to go away, you do an intensive intervention to help get it going. So then they stressed the pancreas to see what it could do using this kind of pancreatic stress test, and they were able to demonstrate that the insulin production went up. This is the normal range up here, and you can see it's almost back up to normal from very low. That's good news, isn't it? So we can see that pancreatic function go up. And it's good news all the way around. One of the first things that disappears when people have type 2 diabetes is that it's called first phase insulin release. When you first take a meal, your pancreas pumps out a bunch of insulin and then it drops back down. And that helps decrease the overall insulin needed. When someone is getting type 2 diabetes, that's the first thing that goes. And he demonstrated that it was coming back. So it's really returning to normal. That's pretty good news, isn't it? So how do you limit your calories? I told you about my patient, Ralph, who I told to use animal products only as a condiment. And certainly I think that would work. But animal products are all refined. The fiber is out. The water is generally mostly out. If you want foods that are the fastest, you use the above-ground vegetables, right? The ones that are green. What above-ground vegetables can you think of? Spinach, good. So that's a green one. Kale, good. That's another green one. Broccoli. Okay, the broccoli, that one's green, isn't it? Again, okay. There's a white one too, isn't there? Cauliflower, okay. Celery, yeah, okay. Cabbage, squash, So these tend to be high in water, high in fiber, meaning they fill you up without giving you so many calories. So it makes more sense to eat a whole food, plant-based diet. It ends up, the more we refine this stuff, the more of the water and the fiber we take out, and the more concentrated the calories are. So it makes most sense to use whole food plant-based.
And should we leave them the way they are, or could they be
Should we leave them the way they are, or should they be cooked? I like to say minimally processed. Get them as close as you can to the way God made them. That would make the most sense to me, right? Here's maybe an example, okay? It would be better to eat a beet than to have beet sugar. The sugar, right, is refined out, so that's your table sugar. And you heard me, speak of apples and apple juice, right? See, you can't just say plants. Apple juice is plants, right? And the apple juice is everything that came from the plant, but there's stuff taken out. So better to take it as close as you can to the way God made it. And as you do that, you'll be healthier, right? And that's not that you can't add, a little something else to it, but it's better to have it whole food plant-based. That's going to be the best way to turn it around.
Because I found out it is absolutely true. Before, I would have, like most people, 3 meals a day. Then in the evening when I had my last meal, I just, as I grew older, I could not sleep that well. Mm-hmm. I had perspiration at night and so forth. So sometimes I didn't want to eat, and then I found I slept better, I felt better. So now I am fighting the battle of not eating a last meal anymore. And that has been so far the best thing for me, but it's still a battle of the bulge.
So she brings up a very, very interesting point, okay? And there's actually a lot of science for this. If those of you who have diabetes have likely been sent to a diabetes educator who told you you needed to eat 6 meals a day, okay? They are not telling you what the latest evidence is, but probably because they don't know. Somebody actually did this, and they did 2 meals a day, skipping supper, versus 6 meals a day. They did the MRI of the liver to see how much fat was in the liver, and they were able to demonstrate that the 2 meals a day, skipping the evening meal, was better. The fat left the liver, and the blood sugars came down more. So we have the science there. For a long time we've known. Remember I told you couldn't take your liver out to make it do push-ups? The way you make your liver to do push-ups is to fast. And you do that by skipping the evening meal. Last year, it's 2 years ago now, in the fall of 2 years ago, I spoke at a conference about reversing diabetes in Australia. And the guy speaking in the same kind of group with me was a gastroenterologist who was talking about the lifestyle treatment of fatty liver. And you know now that fatty liver and diabetes are very close together. And he had published this literature, this is his research, and what he had done was he told people you can eat for 8 hours a day, but for 16 hours you can't eat. And it was that fasting that actually reversed the fatty liver. So we have a lot of evidence that the best way to exercise your liver is to skip that evening meal. The goal, in my mind, is to go to bed with an empty stomach. Now, she also told us that she slept better. There's actually a reason for that. When your intestines are fasting, you don't have food in them, they make buku melatonin. And you heard about melatonin, haven't you? Now, it's hard to skip the evening meal because socially we're not wired that way, right? Everybody eats their big meal at night. If you're flying from here to Paris, do you want them to put the fuel in the airplane here or after you get to Paris? It's kind of a gestalt, isn't it? So if you stop to think about it, and the physiology is here as well, the science is here for our physiology, we burn the calories that we eat during the day much better than we do the ones at night. If you eat a big meal and lay down, your body's going to put it into storage. The studies have actually been done where they had the same number of calories, the same meal in a metabolic ward in the morning or the evening, and the weight comes off better when you have it in the morning. Not all calories are the same. When you eat, it makes a difference as well. So thank you for pointing that out. You'll also find, your brain is clearer. You're just getting better and feeling better. I see the microphone over here, so I'm going to take the microphone, and then we'll come back to you.
Yeah, could you comment on all these statin medications that people seem to take?
Comment on the statin medications. Statin medications help to lower cholesterol. Any medication has potential side effects, so we're concerned about that, and we have some evidence of some problems with some of them. It's interesting, in the heart disease business, there's a big disruption happening right now, and it is a challenge for the cardiologists because their procedures are being demonstrated to be unhelpful much of the time. For example, that stent they put in does not extend life. It only takes care of the symptoms. And their recent study said it really didn't do that much for the symptoms either. So that's saying, what's going on? We used to think it was a cholesterol problem. Cholesterol is only a marker. It's not a disease. More importantly than that is something called inflammation. So now the recommendations are moving from, instead of basing the recommendation for a statin on your cholesterol level, they're basing it on your disease state. That is, if you have diabetes, if you've had a cardiac event, you need to take it no matter what your cholesterol is. Because the cholesterol level is not as important as inflammation, and the cholesterol-lowering medication, the statins, also lower inflammation. So they're now giving the medicine to lower inflammation. Now, interestingly, Dr. Jenkins in, I think, University of Toronto, there's a lot of good stuff that comes out of Canada. We should pay attention to it, right? Did this very interesting study where he compared a statin against a plant-based diet, and was able to show that it lowered the cholesterol in the same way, the LDL cholesterol in the same way, and it decreased the inflammation in the same way. So it makes sense to use the plant-based. And we don't have any huge population studies looking at statins in people on a plant-based diet. I know that taking statins and eating a junk diet does not protect you from a heart attack. You remember Tim Ressert several years ago? Right? He went to his cardiologist, he passed his stress test, his lipids were perfect, he was taking his statin. 1 week later, he had a heart attack right there at work and fell down dead. It doesn't protect you. It decreases the likelihood, but it's not 100% protecting. Your lifestyle is really much more important. Eating plant foods that have anti-inflammatory things in them, you're not getting as many calories, so you don't have the calorie overload. Calorie overload in our bodies increases inflammation. You commented that you stop sweating at night, okay? Sweating at night is our body trying to get rid of the extra calories. It tries to turn it into heat. People who are losing weight tend to get cold. People who have too many calories tend to be hot. And that's the reason. When you're burning more calories, trying to burn those up, you're making more inflammation. So by cutting down the evening meal, by reaching that fasting state, you're decreasing inflammation in your body and helping your heart and a bunch of stuff. That was a lot. Okay, lady with the microphone.
Yes, it's sort of a double question. One, what time should you have your last meal for the day if you're just having 2 meals? And also, how about people that say that if they're hungry, they can't sleep? If they go to bed hungry, they don't sleep well.
Those are 2 good questions. Do you think I should answer them? Okay. Okay, keep me on track here. So, let's see, we've got when is the best time to eat the last meal? The goal is to go to bed with an empty stomach. I have patients who work the night shift. Okay? So I tell them, your stomach needs to be empty when you go to bed. They may go to bed at 8 o'clock in the morning or 7 o'clock in the morning. They need to go to bed with an empty stomach so they sleep with an empty stomach. And I think that is the goal. It takes 8 to 12 hours to reach the fasting state after your last meal. Depending on how much you ate, fat is more important. It will extend the emptying or the fasting time quite a while. So if I were, I'm still in the working class, right? But if I weren't in the working class, I would have my breakfast at about 8 o'clock and my second meal at about 2 p.m., and then I'm done for the day. That's the way I would do it. So, and that's not bad. Some people will make it 3. That's okay. It's okay. There's time because I'm going to bed with an empty stomach. Now, you asked, what about those people who say, I've got to eat or I get tired and I can't sleep at night? And okay. So it's a very interesting phenomenon. Our body gets used to our food. If you always eat at 10 o'clock at night, you don't even have to think about it. Your stomach, your pancreas will begin to put out more insulin and saying, I know at 10 o'clock there's a meal coming. Okay? And then you put the food in and it says, yeah, I knew it. So sometimes if you don't do it, well, that pancreas is putting it out and it'll drop that blood sugar a little low and it will make you kind of really hungry. You may even get an adrenaline response because if the blood sugar goes too low, there is an adrenaline response and that will kind of keep you awake. So it's a matter of increasing the fiber in your diet and then so the blood sugar doesn't go high and then the fiber makes the food hang out for a long time. One of the best foods for this is beans, right? I like to say we're human beings. So if you have beans, they stick with you. They slowly release. They got a lot of fiber, a lot of potassium, a lot of magnesium, all kinds of good stuff. And your blood sugar doesn't go up high because of the fiber. And it's slowly released. So it just keeps hanging a long time. So I'd say for your 2 o'clock meal, because you don't look to me like you're still in the workforce, that you should have some beans. And then when you go to bed, it's much less likely to cause trouble for you. If it still does, take a big glass of water. And when that happens 3 nights in a row, your stomach's going to say, I'm not sure anything's coming. And that helps, right? All I got was water last time. Okay, there was another hand. Yes?
Dr. Michael Greger is a great one that does all these studies.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote the book, How Not to Die.
Yes.
He found a study that instead of taking statins, you can take 4 Brazil nuts once a month, and that replaces the normal doses. On one study he found.
I'm not sure you quoted that study exactly. I've seen it. I think I've got it in my files. And I do appreciate Dr. Greger. If those of you are interested in this type of a thing, you should actually sign up for his little email, nutritionfacts.org. It's great. It comes to you every day, and all he does, he's paid to review the nutrition literature. So he puts it out, and there's great little facts. It's fun. And I like it scientifically because there's a place where I can say sources, and I can get the actual articles themselves, because that's what I want to see. Sometimes the doctor doesn't quote the study correctly, so I'm always trying to get back to the original one. And I'm really lucky because the medical librarian, all I have to do is send her the reference and she'll get it for me. So I'm blessed that way. So Brazil nuts have in them some selenium. Selenium works with what's called glutathione. Glutathione is our own natural antioxidant, okay? And as part of its cycling of the inflammation, the free radicals, it needs that selenium. And you get a little bit of selenium in the Brazil nuts tend to be high in that. So that's probably at least a part of it. Okay? I saw a hand back there. I'm looking for people. Yeah, the lady in the pink, that's the one.
I'm a little bit confused about the homocysteine level.
Yes.
Because there is good inflammation and there is bad inflammation. What causes this? For instance, the high homocysteine level affects joints and the inflammation, and yet they tell us there is good inflammation.
Okay. What's good
Could you
inflammation?
explain that for me?
What's bad inflammation? Good inflammation is local and where you need it at the right time. When it's whole body inflammation, it's not so good. Okay? So if I cut my finger, okay, and I got some germs in there, the inflammatory process is good because it's fighting the infection, it's stopping the bleeding, all the things that it's supposed to do. When it's long-term inflammation, it is a stress that is with me for long periods of time, and that long periods of time tends to cause damage. One of the easiest places to get inflammation in the body is in the endothelium. It's the lining of the blood vessels. And just having a high blood sugar for too long will cause inflammation in the blood vessels. And that inflammation seems to be the root of heart disease. It's a very important part of diabetes and hypertension. It's this whole process we're talking about. So inflammatory foods include those that raise your blood sugar. So that would be things like soda pop and candy and cake. And when your blood sugar goes up without a moderation of fiber, you are causing inflammation in your body. Okay, I see another hand here and another hand here. And then there's one there too. Okay. Do some people digest food faster than others? Yes, some people digest food better than others and faster than others. There are patients that I have that I cannot understand. One of my residents right now, as a matter of fact, I teach the family medicine residents. She is eating around 400 calories a day, and she has dropped her weight from like 200, she's short, 200 down to about 180, and she's plateaued. She cannot get it off. When she goes to the cafeteria, she brings her own Tupperware. She fills it with nothing but salad. No salad dressing, that's all she eats. She exercises regularly. She said I think it was college, she decided to try to lose weight. She was playing soccer at the gym 2 hours, playing soccer. In essence, it was 8 hours of heavy exercise a day and caloric restriction. And her weight finally got down to about 140. And it just wouldn't stay there.
Wouldn't go any further down.
It wouldn't go any further down. And she is one of those people who has a physiology like that. I do not understand why that's the case. It may be hormonal. It could be a genetic sort of a thing. That's very possible. There's another interesting area that has been explored, and that has to do with the bacteria in our colon. The bacteria in your colon decide how easy or hard it is for you to kind of gain weight or lose weight. There's a whole class of bacteria in your colon called firmicutes. When you have a lot of those, you tend to gain weight. There have actually been studies where they did stool transplants. I know, it makes you want to gag, right? Okay. So you kill everything in the colon, and then you put in some bacteria from a healthy person's colon. Usually it's done with a scope. And people actually lose weight with that change. Now, how do you grow good bacteria in your colon? Good bacteria thrive on high fiber foods, plant foods. So we tend to fix our colon mix by increasing the amount of plant foods we eat, and that's generally the best way to go. So I hope that helps. And you got your hand up again, and I just remember I forgot to say anything about homocysteine.
Yes. And then I have another question.
Well, there was somebody else before you.
Do probiotics help in...
So she says, do probiotics help?
I have another one. Is it good to take the digestive enzymes? You know, the health food
Probiotics, digestive enzymes. Okay, here's the probiotics first. Probiotics will help change the bacteria in your gut. But if you do not change what you're eating, we call it the prebiotics, that will not stay long. It's about 6 weeks and it's right back to where it was. Okay? So, yes, they can be beneficial. We have some science on that says yes. But no. No to long-term effects. You have to change what you're eating in order to make that work. And your other question, let's see, digestive enzymes. There may be some benefit, especially as we get older, because our stomachs make less digestive enzymes. I prescribe them at times to people who are having a hard time with their gut. So, yeah, there's some rationale to that. And I think I promised you I would say something about homocysteine. Homocysteine is a breakdown product of a sulfate amino acid. There's a lot of it in meat, although we've never been able to prove that meat necessarily makes the homocysteine go high. We know that there is that relationship. Elevated homocysteine can happen if your B12 is low. So people who are vegetarians or vegans and have B12 deficiency, their homocysteine will go up, and that increases the inflammation and increases the risk of a heart attack. We don't want that to happen. So people who are on a 100% plant-based diet, especially if you live in a very clean environment, should take a B12 supplement, preferably chewed. Now, there are a group of people who have some enzyme problems that may be helped by this, and there's an enzyme deficiency. About 20% of the population has it. That makes it hard for us to kind of make vitamin B12 and folate as active as they should be. And people like that may get helped by taking methylfolate and methyl B12, the already active form. But you've gotten in real deep here, so I'll try not to go any further. Okay, I think this hand and then back over here.
Yes, I have a suggestion to make. If you skip your last dinner, I have gotten that far that I buy an organic detox tea, and then I make a pot of that, and I drink this slowly until I go to bed, and that helps me finally to get more successful with this battle of eating at night.
I like that, especially if you don't put sugar in it, because then there's no calories. Yeah, that's very good.
Okay, I have a series of a couple questions for food-related stuff.
Well, let's make this kind of the last one. I know we've kind of drug on here, and I'll try to answer this, and then I'll be here afterwards to kind of help. Go ahead, sir.
For antioxidants and stuff, like blueberries, cherry, to add to Coke and anything, beneficial. And then about talking about fruits, and curious about melons when it comes to kidney, stuff like that.
Curious about what?
Watermelons.
Watermelon.
Melons
Okay.
in general we don't talk about, you know.
Okay.
Supposedly there's some good ones versus bad ones.
So melons, as far as diabetes is concerned.
Well, I know there's a sugar content to it, but doesn't it have a benefit for your kidneys and stuff?
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the supplements first. Supplements have been confusing to us because we have thought, we've been able to see from epidemiology, for example, and here's one of the first ones that happened to us, that people who got more vitamin A in their diet got less lung cancer. So a bunch of scientists said, let's fund this and prove it. They got a bunch of people with who were smoking. They randomly assigned them to either a placebo or vitamin A, right? And then they watched them over time, and it was surprising to everybody that those who got the vitamin A supplement got the cancer sooner than those that didn't get the supplement. Isn't that terrible? It ends up that many of these studies are looking at markers, right? There's a whole class of carotenoids. When you eat whole food that has the vitamin A in it, it's got a bunch of stuff with it. The package is more important than the individual nutrient. So when we pull these things out and try to give them as individual, we're likely to throw some imbalances, right? And those imbalances can actually cause trouble. We had this similar surprise with vitamin E. We thought it would protect against heart disease, and it doesn't seem to do very well at all. If you eat the whole foods that have the vitamin E in it, then you seem to have the benefit. Now, having said that, there are some I don't want to call them, that's not the right word. I was going to say whole food supplements that I suppose could be beneficial, but I'd like to have as much of the whole food as possible. We might look at tea, for example. I mean, it's leaves, right, that are put in water, and that's, I suppose you could look at, some people use teas as a supplement, right? You use it to go to sleep because the sleepy time tea, some of those things are beneficial. So I think there may be some rationale for that. There are some people who have used like powdered barley, and it allows you to get a lot of greens in. They'll put it in their smoothies, right? In general, though, it's better to eat the whole food rather than the supplement. Okay? So I'd like to leave it at that. Now, to speak as far as people with diabetes and melons and fruit, many of the dietitians, when you talk to them about your diabetic diet, will say don't eat fruit, and they'll try to really minimize it. It ends up that the studies don't actually support that. Fruit tends to help people get better. The problem is too much fruit can drive that blood sugar too high. So what I tell people with diabetes is check your blood sugar 2 hours after you eat. If your blood sugar is over 140, then you should have done some exercise or you shouldn't have eaten so much fruit. So you can adjust one of those two things. Because exercise will take the place of insulin. It'll bring the sugar down. And we know that fruit is very beneficial to health. One of my good friends likes to put it this way, and maybe this is a good one to end on: the fruit, the whole fruit, and nothing but the fruit, so help me.
Okay.
Okay, thank you for everybody's patience.
Or should you say, thank you for being such good patients?
Yes.
Thank you, folks. Now, we're not going to go quite yet, because this was the introduction to a program called Diabetes Undone. I think Denise is going to speak to that. And we really appreciate you coming, Dr. George, and we really have learned a lot. And based on the questions, you've stimulated our thinking. And that's a good place to be. We want to highlight the plant-based, whole food plant-based lifestyle, and that will be over the next 8 sessions. And Denise is going to describe this for us. I'll get a flyer.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Diabetes Undone is a program that we're going to use to follow up Dr. Guthrie's introduction. So it is a series of 8 classes, and we're going to do it over the next 4.5 weeks, I guess, because we're going to do one on Saturday and one on Sunday, afternoons from 2:30 to 4. So more or less the same time that we had today. So it involves a series of video lectures by Dr. Wes Youngberg, who Dr. Guthrie knows, who has worked for many years with people reversing their diabetes, and with a woman who's a registered dietitian. Actually, she's quite famous. She's written a number of books. Her name is Brenda Davis. And she's Canadian, so you know she's really good. So there is a workbook that you get and a cookbook as well. And so we're going to be having food samples each day from the cookbook, so that you get a chance to taste, to see what the food tastes like. And my sister Dolores has graciously agreed to prepare the food samples for us. So we'll be having that. And you will have access, as we go along, to each of the videos. After you come to the class, you'll have a password to go onto the Diabetes Undone webpage and be able to access those videos for a year. So it gives a lot of good support. And in the middle of our Diabetes Undone class, we're also going to spend one of those Sundays, Sunday afternoons, doing a cooking class. So if you start taking the program and you start wondering, what do I eat? Besides the little food samples, one of the Sundays we're going to spend having a class on what to prepare and how to prepare it. Jan Gregston just took the Diabetes Undone class, and Jan, do you mind coming up and telling us something about it? So if you'd like to know something more about it, Jan has a first-person experience.
Well, I decided I go to Dr. Guthrie every once in a while, and he tries to convince me that I should do stuff, and when I'm in his office, I'm willing to do anything, you know. Tell him, yeah, I'll do that, and I go home and thought that was a nice visit. And then 6 months to a year later, I go back and we go the same route, and he's very encouraging, very nice. But then as I got older, I got to thinking maybe, you know, I should actually do it, yeah. So they offered it at the North Lake Church, and my husband and I took it. And it's interesting. We started it February 3rd, and we were supposed to take 2 a week, but then the North Lake Church is out in the middle of nowhere, and some people live 20, 30 miles away, and felt that it was too much to come, so we just would go on Saturday afternoons. And we just went once a week, once a week on Saturdays. And then they had a guy up there that was a chef, and he came in and did all the cooking, and that was the good part. I was wanting to hire him to come and do it because, I thought, I don't know if I can do this, actually do it, but the workbook did help. And the fact is, you can get on and you can go to the website and you can get help from them. And so we kept doing it and kept doing it. And finally I got a doctor's appointment. And I said to the doctor, he said he always checks my cholesterol. I was concerned about my cholesterol because the last time I had it done, it was quite high. And I was really concerned about it. And so then after about 6 weeks of this, I went to the doctor. And I looked at my list of things there, and he had all kinds of things on there I've never seen before in my life. Now, this wasn't Dr. Guthrie. I didn't even know I had that kind of stuff going on in there. It was looking pretty good, but I couldn't find the cholesterol. And I went to the doctor. I said, "Where's my cholesterol?" He said, "I didn't order it." I go every 3 months. He orders it every 3 months, except when I was taking this test. Well, I finally got it back, and it had come down 46 points in 6 weeks, so I thought that was pretty good. My triglycerides are sky high. They had come down 300 points, and they still have to come down a lot. When it was you put up there as more than 150, well, I'd be happy if they were 150. And I found out that one of the things that really helped is every time after eating, tried not to eat so much at supper, trying to give up suppers altogether, but not doing it quite yet. And that's another thing they tell you at the class. It's a journey. You can't expect to do it all in one day. I expected that, but it didn't happen, but I'm doing better. And so if you're here and you're thinking about taking the class, please take it for yourself. And it was really a good class. The cookbook, it's good. It's good. Some of the recipes, I don't know. Some of the things were a little dry, especially the desserts, but I didn't cook many of those anyway, so it didn't matter. But like I said, it's helped me. I feel better. Even if I didn't have all the information from the blood work and stuff. I really have felt better. And we've been trying to do exercising, and this last week I had surgery, and I can't hardly do any cooking. My husband has to do the cooking, so I'm not sure how we're doing. But we got to get back to it. And like I said, it's a journey, and staying off desserts. We even went to Golden Corral and passed up the chocolate fudge. That was the biggie. That was the big test, because we never passed up the fudge. When we walked out, my husband said, "Don't look." So we didn't look. We just looked away. And then our friend came to the door. We were saying goodbye. We were down in Zephyr Hills, and she came and she was eating some of this fudge right in front of me. And I said, "What are you doing?" And she just laughed. And then another friend came up and said, "Well, Judy told us to eat it, but we didn't." So I want to thank Wes Youngberg and all those people who put this together. It was excellent. And like I said, I hope that if you are diabetic, go take it. And my blood sugars have come down, and everything's come down, and I'm so satisfied. Oh, I lost 11 pounds. And I didn't even think, I didn't even think I was losing weight. And I kept looking at the scales, and I thought, well, this can't be right. But then I measured my waist, and I got really excited because that came down 2 inches, I think I lost on my waist. So anyway, it's time to go home.
Thank you, Jan. So the cost for the Diabetes Undone class is $75. And that covers the cost of the cookbook, the workbook, the food samples, and the access to the videos for the year. So we hope that you can come. And I think there's going to be, if you haven't already registered out there, there's a table right outside the door that you can put your name down. And we will start next Saturday afternoon at 2:30 in the room right across the foyer there. Do you have any questions? Yes. It's not required. So if you want to, you may. And just like with everything, we recommend that you let your physician know that you're going to be doing this program so that they can monitor you. Right, exactly. Okay, any other questions? Thank you. Like Dr. Guthrie said, it's an education program, not a treatment program. Bobby.
Obviously, you're not going to have any samples of these programs because that's all going to be after 3 o'clock.
Well, you can, if you don't want to eat it, then you can just take it home and put it, you can put it in your fridge for the next day. Yes. Okay, well, thank you all for coming. We really appreciate it. And thank you so much again, Dr. Guthrie, for coming and sharing your expertise with us.